All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a tutorial lecture on 3b, which is Reconstruction. This actually is in response to your 6 questions, your notes. They have the 6 questions on Reconstruction. So as you listen to this, go ahead and fill out. I'll go through each of these questions and answer them, and then you can write it down on your iPad. Okay? So let's start. So start with question 1. And question 1 on these notes, you have among Southerners who could not hold office and who could hold office. And why do you think it is? We will forget the why do you think it is. Let's just see who could hold office, who could not. So former military leaders could not hold office. People like Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis cannot hold office because it's in the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. When they created it, these folks are individuals or former Confederate leaders, especially those who have sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, cannot hold office. And those who could vote and hold office were African Americans. And during Reconstruction, many white voters in the South refused to participate in the election process. And those who were participating in the election process were either Republicans or African Americans, former freed slaves. And then what occurred is during a course of about 10 years, you had African Americans in Congress and the Senate, along with other positions, other state positions, mainly because those are the only folks who were voting. And it was a great movement for the African Americans, but you didn't have the support. You still didn't have the support from the whites of the South. So that's question 1. Question 2, what law passed in 18... Oh, actually, question 2 we're going to go back to, but this slide here actually answers both question 5 and question 2. So if you go to question 5, it says, how did the black codes limit economic freedoms for African Americans? Essentially, this is what happens. As soon as the war ends, Southern states began to implement what's called the black codes. And these codes were a set of laws, both local and state, that limited the economic political power of African Americans. It's anything from segregation practices, to not allowing African Americans to vote based on race. They would not allow some African Americans to hold good jobs. Kind of limiting the amount of jobs they could get would be some sort of servant job for whites. It's essentially the exact same job they did as slaves, but without being slaves, being paid slightly. And the northern states, when they learned about this, they wanted to combat it. The federal government wanted to end it, this type of practice. So in order to stop this practice, this brings us to question 2. That is the Civil Rights Law of 1866. This law was stating that African Americans have equal rights to whites, and this is a new thing. It's a federal law that's telling states what to do, which is relatively new in this time. And we didn't have any means of enforcing federal law. Like today we have an FBI. They enforce federal law. That's kind of their job. But in 1866, the only group of people that we had to enforce federal law was were federal troops. And federal troops were actually sent to the South to occupy and take and to run things and to enforce the Civil Rights Act, which didn't hold well for the Southern population. They didn't like it. These are the people. These are these troops are, they could blame responsibility for the death of their loved ones because the Southerners, the mothers, or wives, children of Confederate soldiers were the ones that were being occupied by the federal government, and they didn't like it. Okay, so the next question is, you had a lot of freed folks, so people that were given freedom, so African Americans given freedom, and they had to figure out a way to allow them to adjust to civilian life. One method was to create what's called the Freedmen's Bureau. By the way, this is number 3, which was the purpose of the Freedmen's Bureau. And they created the Freedmen's Bureau, and the idea was to help aid enslaved African Americans in the South. They taught them how to read and write. They taught them how to grow crops. They taught them how to run a factory or do a vocational job, and for the reason for them to go into the work field of the South and be incorporated within the society. Now, Southerners didn't like the Freedmen's Bureau. They called those who worked the Freedmen's Bureau, they used the term carpetbaggers to describe them. Now, a carpetbagger is someone who comes from the North and goes and works in the South. They call them carpetbaggers. Many of them carried these things called carpet bags, which are just you convert a carpet into a bag. And some of these folks, these carpetbaggers, would swindle Southerners, sell them cure-all elixirs, or come in to build a factory and then hire a bunch of Southerners and pay them very low wages. There was a lot of opportunity to make money in the South, and those from the North who wanted to make money in the South were often called carpetbaggers. And that was question 4, by the way. The last question, question 6, how did Reconstruction end? Now, Reconstruction was starting to end around the 1870s. Along 1872, during that midterm year, many Democrats were elected into office. This has to do with the American public's getting sick of Reconstruction. They start voting for the opposition party. And once you have more Democrats in office, then you have more, laws that would benefit Southern Democrats. And one of these was the Amnesty Act of 1872. It allowed some Confederate leaders, to actually run for office and hold that position. And then you have what occurs. You actually had like a split, nearly 50-50 Congress and Senate between Democrats and Republicans. And then the presidential election of 1876. This is where it ends. We have a problem because the Electoral College, which is the way we vote for president, could not determine who the president was. It was actually literally a dead heat, a 50-50 heat. And you need to have a majority in order to become president. So what they did was the next step in the Constitution, which says that the Electoral College cannot make a decision, then it will be up to the Senate and the Congress to make the decision. Senate and the House of Representatives. And they would have to have a 2/3 vote in order for this to work. Well, they vote, and they can't get 2/3. They vote again. They cannot get 2/3. And then eventually, Hayes, the partners of Hayes, Republicans and Democrats, come together and have a secret meeting. In this secret meeting, a deal is made. The people that want Hayes to be president, Republicans said to Democrats, they said, hey, we really want Hayes to be president. What can we give you, Democrats, that will give him the presidency? And they quickly responded. They said, we want federal troops out. And they said, deal. And what occurs is because federal troops are enforcing the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and basically occupying the South in Reconstruction, that means that they're no longer going to enforce that federal law, the Civil Rights Act. And that'll just make Southern states go back to the black codes. So what happens? Well, first of all, Reconstruction officially ends in 1877 as a result of as a compromise election of 1876. What ended Reconstruction? That officially ended when federal troops were removed. So you have election of 1876, a deal's made to remove federal troops. They do this by 1877. The result, which is the next question, is how did it affect African-American population? It did not do well for African Americans. Now, without the Civil Rights Act being enforced, states freely started to adopt the black codes. They start to reemerge. They start segregating the South. They start coming up with, they avoided the 15th Amendment by creating the grandfather clause, which stated if you had a family member that could vote between 1870 before 1873, then you didn't have to take a literacy test or pay a poll tax. Of course, those that could vote had an ancestor that could vote before 1873 were white. And so though it didn't outright say African Americans it clearly implied that, and that was the purpose of it. And so that is the tutorial. So I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to give me get in contact with me via email or give me a call, and I'll be able to clarify things for you. All right, so you all have a good night.